We all sleep, but why? It's such a simple question, but the answer is incredibly complex, and it's hidden deep inside our brain's circuitry. For more than 100 years, scientists have been on this quest, looking for the literal on-off switch for our consciousness. So let's follow that journey. We're going to map out the amazing network that decides when you're wide awake and when you're not.
Okay, so our story kicks off way back in 1916 with a neurologist in Vienna, a guy named Konstantin von Economo. He was in the middle of treating patients with this really bizarre illness called encephalitis lethargica. People just called it sleeping sickness. And by carefully, meticulously mapping the brain damage in his patients, he totally stumbled upon the very first clues to the brain's sleep-wake command center.
And this is the central puzzle von Economo uncovered. It's fascinating. He found that his patients who slept almost constantly, we're talking nearly 20 hours a day, had damage in one super specific area, right at the junction of the midbrain and forebrain. But then he had other patients who suffered from the exact opposite, severe, just debilitating insomnia. And their brain damage? It was in a region right nearby, the anterior hypothalamus. So how could damage to two neighboring parts of the brain produce such perfectly opposite results? This incredible paradox is what kicked off a century of research.
To solve von Economo's paradox, we've got to first understand the system that keeps us awake in the first place. So let's start by unpacking the brain's on switch, that internal wake-up call that powers you through your day.
This is it. It's called the ascending arousal system. Now, this isn't just one thing. It's a whole network of cell groups that stretch all the way from the brainstem up into the forebrain. Their whole job is to work together, fire up your cortex, and keep you conscious and alert. And get this. This was the exact system that was damaged in von Economo's sleepy patients. That's why they literally couldn't stay awake. Now, this system isn't just a simple on-ramp. It's got two major branches. The first path goes right through the thalamus. You can think of the thalamus as the brain's central relay station. It's absolutely critical for sending all that sensory info up to the cortex. But the second path is more of a direct shot. It completely bypasses the thalamus to hit the cerebral cortex and the hypothalamus straight on, giving you an extra jolt of arousal.
So, what's fueling these pathways? Well, it's a powerful chemical cocktail of neurotransmitters. I bet you've heard of some of these: histamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, and acetylcholine. These are the messengers, the fuel that the arousal system uses to basically shout, "Wake up!" to the rest of your brain. And they're all firing like crazy when you're awake, and then they quiet right down when you go to sleep.
Okay, so that's the on switch. But what about the off button, right? To find that, we have to go back to von Economo's other patients, the insomniacs, and take a look at the system that was damaged in their brains, the one responsible for flipping the switch to sleep.
All right, meet the star of our show, the ventral lateral preoptic nucleus, or just VLPO for short. It's this tiny little cluster of neurons right in the anterior hypothalamus, which is exactly where von Economo found the damage in his patients with insomnia. We now know that this little spot is basically the brain's master sleep switch.
And here's the cool part. The VLPO doesn't just passively let sleep happen. No, it makes it happen. It's a totally active process. As you start to fall asleep, the neurons in your VLPO start firing, and they release these inhibitory neurotransmitters. The main one is called GABA. And this GABA basically floods those arousal centers we just talked about and tells them, hey, time to be quiet, effectively shutting the on switch off.
Okay, so what we've got here is a wake system and a sleep system that are basically fighting each other for control. But how does the brain manage this constant battle without leaving you in some fuzzy, half-awake, half-asleep state all the time? Well, this is where the design gets really, really clever.
It's called a flip-flop switch, and this is actually a concept borrowed straight from electrical engineering. It describes a circuit where two different parts are constantly shutting each other down. So when your arousal system is on, it's actively suppressing the VLPO. And when the VLPO turns on, it does the same thing back to the arousal system. This elegant design is what gives you those rapid, clean transitions between states. It's why you don't slowly drift off for an hour, you fall asleep.
This pretty much shows the two states perfectly. When you're awake, your arousal system is on full blast, and it's actively telling the VLPO to stay quiet. But then, when it's time to sleep, the roles completely reverse. The VLPO takes charge and silences that entire arousal network. It's got to be one or the other, with almost no time spent in between.
But, this brings up a new problem. A simple flip-flop switch like this, well, it can be a little unstable. What stops a small dip in your alertness, say you're sitting in a really boring meeting, from causing the whole switch to flip, plunging you into sleep? What keeps that switch locked in place when you need it to be?
The answer is a special kind of chemical messenger called orexin. Neurons that produce orexin are hanging out in the hypothalamus, and their job is to act as a stabilizer. I love this analogy. Think of it like putting your finger on a light switch to hold it firmly in the on position. Orexin reinforces the arousal system, making it much, much harder for that switch to accidentally flip over to sleep.
So, what happens if you lose this stabilizer? You get narcolepsy. It turns out, in people with narcolepsy, those orexin-producing neurons have been lost. So without that finger on the switch, their flip-flop circuit becomes incredibly unstable. This is what leads to those irresistible sleep attacks during the day. And it also explains another symptom called cataplexy, that sudden loss of muscle tone, often triggered by strong emotions. It's basically an element of sleep just crashing into the waking state. Okay, so now we have the switch and we have its stabilizer. But the final piece of this whole puzzle is timing. What tells the switch, hey, it's nighttime, it should be easier to flip to sleep now? Well, that's the job of the body's master clock.
Tucked away in the hypothalamus is the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN for short. This tiny group of about 10,000 neurons is your biological master clock. It's the SCN that generates the steady, nearly 24-hour rhythm that coordinates your entire sleep-wake cycle, day in and day out.
So how does it all work? Well, it all starts with light. There are specialized cells in your retina that send signals directly to the SCN. From there, the SCN acts like a conductor of an orchestra, sending out timing signals that tell both the sleep-promoting VLPO and the arousal systems when it's their turn to be active. This whole process is how your internal drive to sleep gets synchronized with the 24-hour light-dark cycle of the world around you.
So why does understanding all this complex circuitry actually matter in your day-to-day life? Well, it explains a ton of stuff. It's why those first-generation antihistamines make you so drowsy, because they block histamine, which is a key chemical in your arousal system. It explains how most sleeping pills work. They just enhance the effects of GABA, the very same neurotransmitter the VLPO uses to turn the arousal system off. And it gives us a clear biological roadmap for understanding disorders like insomnia and narcolepsy, and why even a tiny amount of sleep loss can have such a huge impact on your performance.
You know, as the researchers who unraveled so much of this circuitry wrote, there is a great deal at stake here. From cognitive decline to cardiovascular risk, the consequences of messing with this finely tuned system are just enormous. Understanding the mechanism is really the first step toward learning how to better protect it.
So think about it. We went from a mysterious sleeping sickness a century ago to a detailed circuit diagram today. We've come an incredibly long way. And now that we can truly map the wiring of the brain's sleep switch, the next great challenge is learning how to control it, how to develop smarter therapies for sleep disorders, and maybe even how to optimize our sleep for better health and peak performance. What do you think that future might look like?